Right now, we're highly unsustainable, and it's because we're a mining society. We mine the soils, we mine the groundwater, we mine the forests, we mine the fish, we mine the minerals, and none of that is sustainable. We're just destroying non-renewable resources, so there's no future in it.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. My guest today is Richard Reese, who's the author of What is Sustainable and just published Sustainable or Bust. Thank you for joining me. I want to add that you've been studying history, well, for many years, but most particularly you're focusing on the question of what is genuine sustainability. I mean, it's a word that's thrown around a lot with, and it's getting cheapened. Like green has now gotten cheapened and, anything's greenwashed. But what do you mean by genuine sustainability?
It's good old-fashioned sustainability, fundamentalist sustainability. It's a way of living that can persist for thousands of years without unbalancing the ecosystem. It's like the ducks here. They've lived here for tens of thousands of years, and the ecosystem is cool, and that's what it's about.
So if you're really raising that question and one starts looking, it's like most of how we all live, let's say in civilization, industrial civilization, it isn't sustainable. I mean, that's right. Pretty far away from that.
As far as we can possibly be, and sustainability is like Mars, it's just a tiny idea out there that we don't think about or don't come anywhere near.
So you're really asking not how we might get there, but the way nature works is if something isn't sustainable, it comes to an end. Right? I mean, if there's just not enough food on an island, the animals that have been depending on it eventually die out or swim away or whatever, they disappear.
Right.
And since this is so highly unsustainable, which we could talk about, and isn't thus going to last, then can you give us any kind of idea of what that might look like for human societies to be in the future, to be sustainable? And maybe also we've got some guidance from those who still are or were.
We can look to the past. I mean, it's about slower and simpler.
Okay.
And so there's much we can learn from the ancestors because they lived much closer to sustainability than we are. And we can't really say what sustainability is going to look like. We will get there. I mean, whether we survive or not, if we disappear, then it'll be sustainable. And if we learn how to live with the earth again, then we'll be sustainable. But who knows what the planet's going to look like at that point in time, if it's going to be, a desert or a jungle or,
Well, as you said, there's a lot of factors in. I mean, people are aware that things are collapsing now, partly digging deeper for oil or fracking for natural gas or, the more and more desperation to get resources. So it would seem to me that people have a sense that we can't, and the population game, we can't kind of keep that. That's not going to, at some point, something's going to crash, something's going to give, and the climate as well. So though we may not have a glimpse, the people in the past, what have you gleaned from some of the values or principles or practices they had that you think could help us know what sustainability would look like?
Family planning is an important part of it. Not having 8 or 12 children or 18 children. There's sustainable societies limited the number of children that survived, and they didn't overhunt. They either lived in an area of abundance or had inadequate technology or had wisdom enough to, some of them had taboos against overhunting, and so they had systems for living with the land. But we don't know what the future brings, if the wildlife is going to make it beyond the climate change and the collapse of civilization. We're living in an immense bubble right now that's fueled by all this fossil energy, and as that gets scarcer and more expensive, it's going to really slam into our food system or agriculture, and we can't feed 7 billion indefinitely as it is, because we're mining the soils and we're mining the aquifers, we're mining the rivers, and it just cannot last. And as the fossil energy gets more expensive and scarce, it's going to come apart, and we're going to scramble to survive because the safe way is not going to be there. And
right. That the sort of peak everything kind of picture that, and peak toxicity as well, and pollution. There's a lot of things that are going to compromise life for ourselves and others. I think one of the things you have said is that, does this mean, do we return to the Stone Age? Is that what that points to?
Right now, we're highly unsustainable, and it's because we're a mining society. We mine the soils, we mine the groundwater, we mine the forests, we mine the fish, we mine the minerals, and none of that is sustainable. We're just destroying non-renewable resources, so there's no future in it. And the ore deposits are getting scarcer and leaner. It used to be 10% metal content. Now it's 0.01%, and it's a lot more expensive to process and that sort of thing.
Right. So we're sort of out on that thin edge of the limb. Sort of, if you out on a limb, at some point it's just going to be depleted. It's going to be gone or too expensive to try and mine all of that. So if we look at sustainability being a culture that doesn't mine and use up all those resources, the best I know about is like, well, okay, then would you still have domesticated animals? You could, would we be thinking about going back to the hunting and gathering, of the pre-metals age? But we're doing that with a world where there's certainly not all the animals that we had at that time. A depleted planet. So it's like I'm just fuzzy. What do you think?
The safest path is slower and simpler, and domesticated animals and domesticated plants, especially grains, annual plants, are very risky. If you have cattle and sheep like in Oregon, then the wolves are a problem and the coyotes are a problem. They must be killed. We can't have agriculture without controlling nature. You've got to build a wall between the domesticated world and the wild world, and that doesn't feel right. So I would hope for a future when those animals are gone. Because the wild sheep and the wild beef, the aurochs, they were. I just read about the horses. The horses used to be fierce too. You didn't. Right now, you can walk into a horse pasture and no problem. But all those wild animals, the wolf, were powerful things that took care of themselves. The bison didn't need shepherds or ranchers to shoot the wolves and the coyotes.
So what you really are saying is that at the point at which humans, you talk about, began to really use tools, we separated ourselves. We pulled ourselves and said we're different than nature, all the rest of nature. We began to behave that way, and it led to domestication of animals and agriculture and all the technologies that we see. So are you suggesting that what we may find in sustainability way down the road is the same kind of That we're wild animals among the other wild animals?
Yeah, that's where we all started. And when we were all animals, everything worked fine. We went along with nature rather than getting in the driver's seat and trying to control the world and manipulate it and exploit it. So.
And what I also hear, and what that brings up, is I can imagine somebody saying, why would we want to do that? I mean, talk about the insecurity. I mean, you could get eaten by the other animals. It's like, why would we want to lose our edge, if you will, that tools gave us or whatever? Why? Isn't that I hear that kind of the fear.
Yeah. And that's at the core of the problem is, would you rather have your computer and your car and your heating system, or would you rather be running around with a spear in the woods? And nobody wants to be wild and free. And screw the children and the grandchildren. We need to stick with what we have, and we're not willing to think beyond that. Because
we've been lulled, haven't we, by the relative comforts of this, and sort of we in consumer society, as this, it's like they just keep feeding the addictions to more and so on. I mean, I can imagine it's just easier to be comfortable than to think of being able to prepare oneself to live in a far more sustainable way. So we give up our freedom. We give up our wildness in civilization.
Yeah, it's a strong moving current that just sweeps everything away.
Yeah.
Peer pressure, habits.
Yes.
And
a whole lot of domination, and a whole lot of boxes that that's the haves and the have-nots. That's and gender and color and racial hierarchies and so on. It is a big, slower and simpler, Richard. You shared a story that we just read about a young boy who was wild and free. Would you tell that a little bit to our audience about Tarzancitos?
It was around 1933 in El Salvador, in the jungle. People found this wild boy. They saw him in the woods, in the jungle, and they tried to catch him, and they could never catch him. And 2 years later, I think it was around 1935, they finally caught the kid. And he was naked and just 5 years old. And he lived in the jungle on mostly fish and lizards and fruit and nuts. And he took care of himself. And he hated being in the village and living indoors and eating cooked food and wearing clothing. And he just wanted to get back to the jungle, to home, to life. And the world of the village was so sterile and dry and empty compared to living in the forest and sleeping in the trees so that the cats wouldn't eat them. And it's just an amazing story. And people think, well, we can't live like that. But there's a 5-year-old kid who lived for 2 years on his own in the jungle.
Wow.
It's a fascinating story. And there's lots of people that were raised by wild animals, over the history. Wolves raised a lot of children, people would set their kid down while they're working, and the wolves would take them, and sometimes they didn't eat them. And
well, yeah, we certainly have examples of animals nurturing animals of different species. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
What I hear in that story, and in your telling of it, is that yearning for freedom, for that wildness, is innate in us. And there's probably a longing. It's maybe been well buried by civilization, or well snuffed out, tried to be snuffed out. But I hear that longing. I think I hear it in you, making that call, that trying to have us remember that we are like the other animals, wild and free and able. He's an example that we are able. We couldn't do it now. I mean, tomorrow. But that capability is still there within the human being to live that way in certain settings, certain locales. We probably couldn't do it in the Arctic easily without tools. Maybe the longing is there for that.
Yeah, the jungle, the tropical regions are where it's easiest to live slow and simple. You know, the Arctic is the most challenging place where survival is hard and death is a constant threat, because if you rip your jacket, you could freeze to death. And there's a story of the Danish explorer who's in Greenland. He got caught in a blizzard and crawled under his sled to take a nap, and when he woke up his leg was frozen solid and he lost it. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, and across the street was a woods, and there were lakes and ponds, and I spent my childhood outdoors. There wasn't much television, and we fished a lot. I mean, we were always outside. And later, when I was 40, I spent 9 years up in Upper Michigan near Lake Superior, where I spent more time with wild animals than with people. And I realize now that most people don't have that experience. Most people don't feel the sense of connection to life that I have. So I realized that that was a gift. And I think that's was something we need to get back in touch with. These poor kids today staring at their cell phones and stuff, you know, I don't know, they're going to have a real rough way of going.
So just to thank you, because that you resonate that longing in me too, that simpler, closer to nature connection that we can recultivate, reawaken to, maybe begin to listen again. I don't know what the right words are for it, but it's not lost in civilized human if one wants to listen.
I think, I mean, there's people that say that it's like speech. If you don't learn to speak by 3 or 4 years old, that ability, there's a window when you can learn to speak, learn to walk upright on 2 legs. And that imprint with nature might be something that you have to do, while you're a child in your younger years. If someone spends their whole life in New York City and at 50 goes out in the woods, I'm not sure that it's going to be as natural for them. But I might be wrong.
Well, we'll get to find out.
I mean, there's certainly a lot of people who are not comfortable. The other day, along the trail here, I ran into a girl who was just terrified out of her mind because there was a snake sunning himself on the path, and she was just shaking with fear. Don't let him get me! Don't let him get me! And I thought, it's all right. It's just a relative.
Yes, yeah.
But she was terrified.
In the last couple of minutes here, I just want to give you the space. Is there anything, we could talk for a long time, but I just want to say anything that's sort of close to your heart right now, or sort of this idea you want to make sure that we can seed for other people to consider, or just what you're passionate about.
I've been studying many realms of knowledge, and who are we, where are we from, why did we get this way, and it's a story of tools. And the Neanderthals, they were ambush hunters with heavy wooden spears. They'd surround a mammoth and then jam it and kill it that way. The Homo sapiens had lighter spears with stone tips or antler tips. They could throw those so they could kill from a distance, so they could kill more animals. And then they got traps and barbed fish spears and nets. And so we kept evolving more and more technology for killing more and more food, and the big animals kind of faded off, and then we started eating medium-sized animals, and then rats and birds, and so we got too good with the tools. And it seems in this Tarzancito in El Salvador, he lived without tools. He lived with his hands, and he ate everything raw, and he slept in trees, and he was sustainable. He didn't disrupt the forest. And this game with tools is very risky, because if we were rational and reasonable, we would think, is this going to be too much? Is this bow and arrow? And, oh my God, what a terrible weapon. Could really kill a lot of animals with that bow and arrow. And then we don't think, what's the consequence of that?
Yes.
We build 440 nuclear power plants before we imagine a way of dealing with this super toxic waste that lasts for hundreds of thousands of years. And so we're really clever on the tool-making side of the game and very undeveloped on the foresight side of the game. And that is a serious defect in who we are. And so the healing process is going to be to either learn foresight or back off on the technology. And sort of now we're in a trap because those who have the best weapons and tools do better than those who don't. So it keeps ratcheting
this
up,
right. It's the king of the mountain game, and it's like it appears to be without an end.
Well, it will end. And the temporary peak of this bubble of energy is one side, and on the other side is climate, and we're in a no man's land of, on one hand we're not going to have anything to eat, and on the other hand, the climate change could suddenly. Our entire food system is dependent on this climate that we have now, which has been unusually stable for 10,000 years.
Yes.
And the story of history is that this is a freak period in time, this stability, this warm weather. And I was just watching a video today of Greenland. Glaciers are melting so fast, and the rivers are just roaring and knocking down bridges. It's just, so change is coming. And
it's happening quickly.
Yeah,
for us to be able to just look at the differences, just to say in the 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah.
It's like it's just accelerating, ratcheting up.
So I guess that's an important. And the other thing is, there's nothing more important than to understand what sustainability means. And as a society, it's just virtually an unknown idea, except we call everything sustainable: sustainable mining, sustainable logging, sustainable forestry, or sustainable agriculture. And that's just a marketing hype, it's just nonsense, or what I call ersatz sustainability. But right now, we've got this vast communication system where we can talk to people around the world, and I think now is an ideal time to discuss the subject of sustainability because it's so unknown, and we're plunging into this storm. If anyone survives the storm, it would be good if there was some notion of sustainability that made it to the other side. And so what I'm especially talking to are movie makers, writers, playwrights, song makers, to get the discussion going, because it's so important and it's so unknown.
And we can't. It seems so important that we have some vision of where we're going.
Yeah.
And so if you have a vision of what is sustainable living like for post-industrial civilized humans, some pictures, some possibilities, people can consider moving that way instead, because what we know, this is all normal. Exploiting everything is normal.
Yeah.
This energy bubble that we've lived in, no one in living memory hasn't been, it's been part of the lives of everyone that's alive now. The fossil fuel bubble. I don't think we have anybody 150 years old still on the planet that would remember life before that. So this is what we think is normal. And we can't imagine it being different, or, other than a few small changes. But to talk about a life where we are either really, really mindful of what we use tools for, which looks to me like taking the technology ladder way, way, way down to a much, simpler level, hugely simpler. No, we won't be sewing and canning and moving around in vehicles and metal. There won't be metals, right? That's part of technology.
Right.
Clay, ceramics. So I think your notion of bringing that onto the table for us to both imagine it and discuss it should be Sustainability 101. It should be the first thing kids get in kindergarten, first grade, and on up.
There's a pattern in history. Every civilization collapses. They destroy what they depend on for survival and collapse. And then the survivors regroup and repeat the same mistakes. And it's been over and over and over and over again. And it's the easiest way to come out of a collapse is to do what you already know.
Yeah.
And so it's the easiest but the dumbest way out of the storm. And pursuing mindfully sustainability is the most difficult but the smartest way to emerge from the storm. And there's not, I'm not bidding everything that we're going to succeed at that, but it feels like what I need to be saying with my life at this point in time.
Yeah, it's to share. Thank you for doing that. I want to say that I am enriched by reading, and you're sifting through other cultures, other observers, other writers, which you've done a lot of in Sustainable or Bust as well, and your own reflections on that. It's sort of like has helped me pare down my thinking, and I appreciate that. And I think you've begun. You're doing it. You're getting that question in front of us that I think we'll need to carry that question and exploration for the rest of our lives, and I hope the young folks do it after us. Yeah.
My ideal audience is the creative people, the people that are idea makers, but everybody else too. I mean, I'm also talking to them. It's time we talk about this and have a serious, talk about the birds and the bees.
And life continuing, yes.
Avoiding extinction.
Thank you. Avoiding extinction. Yeah, I think that could matter a lot.
Oh, that's
a
the easy
lot
way
of
out.
this. Yeah.
Just keep driving.
Yeah. Thank you for
You're
this conversation.
Thank
And for
you.
those of you who are the creative folk that Richard says, let's give us some ideas, give us some pictures, give us some songs. What is it like to be really sustainable? I'm Janaea Donaldson. This is Peak Moment. My guest is Richard Reese, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.